In today's world, many people arm themselves with pepper spray or other self-defense tools when leaving home. It's become as habitual as grabbing your keys or wallet. But what happens when a crime occurs that prompts people, particularly college students, to start buying weapons en masse for their own safety? Just such an event shook a small town, striking fear into its residents. It all started when 19-year-old Bryana Denisson, a sophomore studying child psychology at Santa Barbara College, vanished without a trace from her friend's apartment in the city of Reno, Nevada. It was the worst nightmare come to life, disappearing in the middle of the night from a place that seemed like a safe haven. And the deeper the investigation went, the more disturbing details surfaced, unsettling the community. This story contains all the elements of a tragedy: fear, brutality, and a fatal ending. Bryana Denisson, affectionately called Bree by those close to her, was born on March 29, 1988, to Jeff and Bridget Denisson. She had a younger brother, Bryden, and although their family was small, it was full of love and harmony. Bree's father was in business, so they lived quite affluently in Reno, but their family happiness was short-lived. In 1994, when Bree was only 6, her father Jeff took his own life after his business came under federal investigation for financial fraud. It was a terrible blow to the family. Jeff was only 34, and his action left a deep wound in the hearts of his loved ones. Despite the shock, Bridget, Bree, and Bryden rallied even closer together, supporting one another. Bridget, left alone with 2 children, worked tirelessly to provide them with a decent life. Bree, a lively and cheerful girl, moved with her family to Mendocino, Bridget's hometown in California, after the tragedy that shook their family. Bree had excellent communication skills and easily made friends, which made her sociable and popular among her peers. After graduating from Reno High School in 2006, she chose child psychology as her calling and entered Santa Barbara College. Everyone who knew her said it was the perfect choice for her. Bridget loved to travel. This passion was born after a year of studying in Rome, Italy. Later, she visited the most diverse corners of the planet: Hawaii, New York, Mexico and Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Australia, France. The list of her trips was impressive. Despite her young age, she strived to live life to the fullest. She had an especially warm relationship with her brother Bryden. Bree was a caring older sister, always ready to offer wise advice. He could turn to her with any problem, knowing that she would certainly help find a solution. Everyone predicted a brilliant future for her: college, travel, happy moments with friends. But in January 2008, when Bree came to Reno for her winter break, something horrific happened. And it became another shock for the Denisson family. That year, the winter break fell in January, and Bree planned to meet up with her school friends. They arranged several activities organized by the travel company Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, which specialized in student trips. In addition, Bree and her friends were going to celebrate the Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. The evening of January 19th was eventful: concerts, parties, get-togethers. They planned to attend an event at the Sense Regency Resort, now known as J Resort, on North Arlington Avenue. Time flew by unnoticed, and late night arrived. Bree and her friends, Jessica and Katie, were staying at Katie's place, which was near the University of Nevada. It was off-campus housing located on McKay Court in Reno. Jessica left earlier in the company of an unknown guy, as she needed to get up early for work. Katie and Bree returned later, changed clothes, and went to their respective rooms. Katie went to bed in the bedroom, while Bree, for some reason, decided to sleep in the living room. She settled on the couch, grabbing a pillow, 2 blankets, and a stuffed animal. Here it's worth noting a telling detail: the glass front door to the girls' apartment was practically never locked. Not the most prudent decision, but the motive was simple: if one of the friends lost their keys and no one was home, they could get inside without any trouble. It was a fatal mistake, the consequences of which no one could have imagined. The girls were used to this state of affairs and believed that they were in no danger. But the absence of unpleasant incidents in the past didn't guarantee that it would always be so. This miscalculation led to horrific events that became a nightmare for the Denisson family and Bree's friends. According to phone records, that evening Bree was talking to her boyfriend Cameron. They had been a couple since their freshman year of college and had been together for a long time. An argument flared up between them because Bree was staying out late at student parties. But soon they settled the conflict, and it seemed that was the end of it. Bree went to bed. The morning of January 20th, around 9 a.m., Jessica and Katie woke up and started getting ready. They noticed Bree's absence from the couch but didn't think much of it. The friends assumed that she might have gone to her room during the night but decided not to check. Everything seemed quite ordinary. However, time passed, and Bree still hadn't appeared. Then the girls finally looked in her room but found that she hadn't even been there. Returning to the living room, they noticed strange details. The blanket remained on the couch, but the other one was lying on the kitchen floor near the back door. Moreover, Bree's stuffed animal was missing, and there was a red stain on the pillow. This raised alarms. Katie and Jessica immediately contacted Bree's mother, Bridget, informing her of their friend's disappearance. Bree's phone, wallet, and purse were left in place, making the situation even more worrisome. Bridget, seized by panic, called the police, and investigators soon arrived at the scene. An examination of the apartment revealed no signs of a struggle, but since the door was unlocked, the version of an abduction in the middle of the night seemed most likely. The police focused on the pillow, on which they found 3 red stains and smeared mascara. This could indicate that Bree had been crying while talking to her boyfriend but didn't explain the origin of the stains. But soon, an even more sinister detail emerged: small indentations resembling teeth marks were noticed on the pillow. This led to the thought that the girl had been forcibly pressed into the pillow, possibly to muffle her screams. The apartment was cordoned off for a thorough forensic examination. During the inspection, traces of male DNA were found on the upper bar of the couch, and analysis of the stains confirmed they belonged to Bree. The investigation into her disappearance started immediately, and the FBI soon joined the case. The situation looked extremely complicated. Bree had vanished from a place where she should have felt completely safe, and no one could guess where she had gone. Moreover, a series of brutal assaults had occurred in the area in recent months, prompting investigators to consider the possibility of a serial offender. First, they checked those who had last been in contact with Bree. Among them were her boyfriend Cameron and the stranger who had given Jessica a ride home. However, both had solid alibis, and their DNA did not match the samples found. The investigators carefully examined every lead. 9 days after Bree's disappearance, on January 29, 2008, a woman came to the police and told them about an attack on her friend in the University of Nevada parking lot. The victim had suffered aggressive harassment but was unable to see the attacker's face. She only remembered that it was a blond man driving a blue pickup truck, probably a 2007 or 2008 model. After the incident, the woman went to the police and underwent a medical examination, during which DNA samples were taken from her. The investigators decided to compare the biological traces found at the scene of Bree's disappearance with the samples obtained after the attack, and the analysis revealed a match. The person who attacked the woman turned out to be the same one involved in Bree's disappearance. This news alarmed the girl's family and friends, but at least the investigation was finally moving forward. Armed with this information, the detectives went public, revealing all the details known to them in the hope of getting new leads. It brought results. Another woman reported that she had been the victim of a brutal attack in the same place and under similar circumstances shortly before Bree's disappearance. Another common feature of these attacks was that the perpetrator took a piece of the victim's clothing as a trophy. In both cases, it was underwear. Such behavior indicated his perverse and cruel disposition. The victim of the second attack managed to see the criminal's face, thanks to which a composite sketch was created that helped in the search for the suspect. At the same time, a large-scale search operation was underway, covering an area of about 100 square miles. Hundreds of volunteers took part in the search, including Nevada's First Lady Dawn Gibbons, wife of Governor Jim Gibbons. Bree's mother, Bridget, held out hope that her daughter was still alive, as the offender's previous victims had survived. The police carefully studied the list of individuals who had previously committed violent crimes in the area, but there were no leads. Everything changed in February 2008, almost a month after Bree's disappearance. On February 15, an IT company employee, Albert Himmons, while heading to Subway for his lunch break, noticed something on the side of the road that looked like a mannequin in bright orange socks. As he got closer, he realized with horror that it was a woman's body. Stunned, he returned to work and called the police. The investigators who arrived at the scene immediately understood that something terrible had happened. Next to the body lay 2 items of clothing, one of which belonged to Bree, while the other could not be identified. Later, an examination confirmed that the body found was that of 19-year-old Bryana Denisson. When Bree's family learned about this, no words could prepare them for such awful news. The nightmare, which had recently seemed unbelievable, had become a reality. The results of the forensic examination were shocking. The injuries indicated that the killer had ended her life with his bare hands. But during the questioning of Bree's friends, the investigators stumbled upon another strange detail. Katie's friend recognized her own underwear among the items found. It turned out that the criminal had somehow gotten into their home and possibly moved stealthily through the rooms in search of a victim. Despite this new evidence, the police still had no information about the identity of the perpetrator. The Denisson family sought justice, but more than 10 months passed before the investigation finally made progress. So how did they manage to track down the criminal? It all started on November 1, 2008, when a woman told her friend that she had found several sets of women's underwear in her husband's truck. They were just returning from the state of Washington, where he had been working since March of that year. The friend noticed similarities with previously committed crimes and decided to report it to law enforcement through an anonymous tip program. Suspicion fell on 27-year-old James Michael Bila, a resident of Sparks, Nevada. He worked as a maintenance technician and plumber and had previously served in the Army, from which he was discharged for using prohibited substances. In addition, he was into martial arts and had a hot temper. At the time of his arrest, Michael was married and had a son. He was detained just as he was dropping his son off at the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. The man was charged with abduction, brutal assault, and the crime against Bree. During questioning, Bila refused to provide DNA samples and denied involvement in all the crimes, but investigators found a way to prove his guilt. They asked Bila's wife to voluntarily provide a DNA sample from their son, and she agreed. The test results showed that one of the boy's relatives had left DNA traces in the apartment from which Bree had disappeared. This became irrefutable proof of Bila's involvement. Moreover, his DNA matched the samples found on Bree's body, as well as those of the other female victims. With this indisputable evidence, the investigators were able to obtain an arrest warrant for James, as well as permission to take his DNA. Thus, he fell into the trap skillfully set by the detectives. His wife and, indirectly, his son made his arrest possible. The investigation revealed that James had had problems with the law before. In 2001, he was arrested for threatening his girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. They also managed to track down his blue pickup truck, which completely matched the description given by one of the victims. Although by that time he had already sold the vehicle, the investigators were able to locate it, and during an inspection of the interior, they found clothing fibers that matched those on Bree on the night of her disappearance. In court, James refused to plead guilty, so a trial was scheduled. If convicted, he faced not only life imprisonment without the possibility of parole but also the death penalty. The trial began on May 12, 2010, and lasted about 15 days. The prosecution presented a substantial body of evidence, including testimony from colleagues, victims, and even James' wife. The investigation revealed that on January 20, James was in the McKay court area, looking for his next victim. Through the glass doors, he noticed Bree sleeping carelessly on the couch and decided that she would be his next target. The doors turned out to be unlocked, so he easily got inside, overcame the girl's resistance, and took her to a deserted place. There he brutally killed her, leaving no witnesses. Before that, he committed a deliberate assault. Testimony confirmed that after the discovery of Bree's body, there were dramatic changes in James' behavior. His boss said that he had become nervous and irritable. When employees discussed the gruesome find, James reacted by saying, "It's her own fault." The defense tried to portray him as a person whose childhood was filled with difficulties, hoping to mitigate the sentence in this way. They also emphasized the defendant's exemplary behavior in prison, but the court ignored these arguments. On May 27, 2010, the jury found James guilty on all charges. On July 30 of the same year, he was sentenced to death, as well as given 4 life sentences for the abduction and assaults on 2 women that preceded the crime against Bree. The victims also spoke at the court hearing, and one of them demanded that James look her straight in the eye, but he never dared to do so. Bree's memory was honored on February 23, 2008, during a memorial ceremony attended by family, friends, and acquaintances. People brought flowers, notes, photos, and ribbons as a tribute to the 19-year-old girl who had so many plans and dreams ahead of her. After this tragedy, the state of Nevada passed Bryana's law, which requires all criminals, regardless of the severity of their offenses, to submit DNA samples for inclusion in the national database. After all, earlier, when James was arrested in 2001, his genetic profile did not enter the system, which is why the investigation dragged on for almost a year. Bree's family still cannot recover from the irreparable loss. For Bridget and Bryden, this tragedy was another cruel blow of fate after the death of the head of the family. They try to move on, but the pain of loss cannot be described in words. After Bree's high-profile case, sales of pepper spray, self-defense devices, and weapons skyrocketed in the vicinity of the University of Nevada. People began to take their own safety more seriously, as one single individual managed to destroy someone's life by choosing a victim where she felt completely protected. This tragedy instilled fear and a sense of helplessness in people, even in their own homes. It turned out that even securely locked doors cannot guarantee complete safety if someone has such horrific and senseless intentions. Years later, one can only hope that the Denisson family has managed to find at least some solace. Bridget's brother was able to recover and is now taking care of his son, but there is little information about how her mother is coping with the grief. Losing a husband is already a terrible ordeal in itself, but losing a daughter soon after is a pain that is impossible to come to terms with. This story has been deeply etched in the memory of everyone who followed the course of the investigation. It changed people's attitudes toward personal safety issues and made many realize how important it is to remain vigilant even in the routine of everyday life. The night enveloped everything in its dark veil when Susan, a young mother of 2 sons, froze behind the steering wheel. Her fingers nervously tapped a rhythm on the steering column, and a single thought pulsed in her head: how much simpler everything would be without the children. It seemed like an ordinary evening outing with the little ones, but in reality, it was a point of no return. Susan took a deep breath and exited the car, pushing it towards the water. The wheels rolled across the grass, and the vehicle smoothly slid into the lake like a heavy stone. A short scream, muffled by the splash of water, and only concentric circles remained on the surface. In a few hours, Susan would be begging the police to find her children, and in another day, the whole country would see her tears on television. But the truth would only be revealed 9 days later. She knew where they were from the very beginning. Susan was born in the fall of 1971 in the small town of Union, South Carolina, becoming the 3rd and youngest child in the family. However, her childhood was far from ideal. Tragedy struck the family when Susan was just 6, her father Harry took his own life. This loss left a deep mark on the little girl's soul, creating a feeling of emptiness. She sought solace in small things, starting to collect coins and often listening to a recording of her father's voice, as if trying to keep his presence near. Life went on, and Susan's mother, Linda, soon remarried. Her chosen one was Beverly Russell Jr., a stockbroker and respected member of the religious community. He seemed like the perfect husband, but something dark lurked behind the facade of respectability. When Susan turned 15, her stepfather began to harass her. The defenseless girl dared to tell a school counselor, who informed her mother. Linda, shocked by the news, confronted her husband. He admitted guilt, promised to change, and agreed to family therapy. But it turned out to be empty words. Soon everything repeated again. Susan was left alone with her pain, without the support of her family. Depression, possibly exacerbated by a genetic predisposition, became Susan's constant companion. By the age of 13, she had repeatedly tried to harm herself, fighting inner demons. But despite everything, she managed to finish school in 1989. Adulthood brought new trials. An affair with a married man who broke her heart further worsened Susan's emotional state. Doctors diagnosed her with an adjustment disorder, manifested in unstable behavior and frequent breakdowns. In the midst of personal dramas, Susan met David Smith. Pregnancy accelerated events, and at 19, she was already married. The couple worked at a supermarket, and soon 2 sons were born, Michael and Alexander. But happiness was short-lived. David, who came from a strict family of Jehovah's Witnesses, was going through difficult times himself, the death of his brother and his father's suicide attempt. The emotional tension that reigned in the family led to constant separations and reconciliations. So, in a tangle of personal tragedies and failures, the fates of Susan and her children were intertwined, destined to become victims of her inner demons. The story that began on that fateful night forever changed the lives of many people, becoming a testament to how psychological trauma can push a person to commit the most terrible crime. In the midst of personal dramas in 1994, when the couple was once again on the verge of divorce, Susan started an affair with Tom, the city's most eligible bachelor and her boss's son. She cherished the hope that she had finally found what she so desperately wanted, stability and reliability in a relationship. But Tom quickly dispelled her illusions. For him, a relationship with a woman burdened with children was an undesirable burden. Their worldviews turned out to be too different, and Susan's behavior raised doubts in him. Tom sent her a breakup letter in October 1994, and on the 25th of the same month, their last conversation took place. During the conversation, information emerged that could compromise Susan in the eyes of the public, her long-term relationship with her stepfather. In response, she accused Tom of incest with his father. After that, he ordered her to get out. This happened just 3 hours before the tragedy. On the same day, October 25, 1994, Susan called 911 and reported the kidnapping of a car along with her sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alexander. According to her, an unknown man jumped into the car at a red light, pushed her out, and drove away with the children. In a panic, she ran to the nearest house to call the police. Over the next 9 days, Susan did not leave TV screens, begging the kidnapper to take care of her boys and bring them home. She promised to do everything possible to get the children back. Thousands of people across the country followed the developments. But inconsistencies began to be noticed in her story. Investigators found that the traffic light at the mentioned intersection could not turn red in the absence of other traffic. And Susan's story itself changed with each new interrogation. Instead of focusing on the search for the children, she kept asking if Tom would come to her. Strange behavior for a mother of missing toddlers. The polygraph also did not give convincing results, only increasing the suspicions of the investigators. Susan's acquaintances recalled how during these days she constantly asked about Tom, as if forgetting about her sons. The police and volunteers were looking for the children, and she was only concerned about her own love affairs. David, despite all the inconsistencies, believed in his wife's innocence. He even gave her advice on how to pass the polygraph. But no test proved her truthfulness. Yet David still criticized the police, accusing them of wasting time on interrogations instead of looking for the real criminal. On November 3, 1994, an unexpected turn occurred. Susan confessed. She said that on October 25, she drove to the lake with the intention of drowning herself along with the car. But at the last moment, she changed her mind, left the car in neutral, and watched it slide into the water. She indicated the exact place where the car ended up. Divers found the vehicle with the bodies of Michael and Alexander, who were still strapped in their car seats. One small hand was touching the glass, that's how close the seat was to the window. As it turned out, the investigators did not believe Susan from the very beginning, but they did not have direct evidence. They even searched the same lake, but to no avail. They only looked within 10 meters of the shore, and the car was at a distance of 37 meters. No one guessed that it could end up so far away. To avoid the influence of TV cameras on the process, as was the case in the O.J. Simpson trial, the judge prohibited the broadcast of Susan's trial. The defense insisted on her mental disorder as a result of the traumas she experienced, the death of her father and the cruelty of her stepfather. They claimed that she wanted to commit suicide together with the children, but changed her mind at the last moment. The prosecution, on the other hand, portrayed her as a manipulator who committed the crime because of Tom's refusal to build a relationship with a mother of 2 children. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Susan guilty of first-degree murder. On July 22, 1995, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with the right to parole after 30 years. The prosecution insisted on a more severe sentence, but the jury took into account the defendant's difficult childhood. Serving her sentence in the Greenwood prison, Susan tried to appeal the verdict several times. She claimed abuse in marriage, but David denied everything, and the investigation found no evidence in her favor. In 2015, Susan made a statement to the press, claiming that her act was not planned, and the motives were misinterpreted. She denied the connection of her actions with the desire to maintain a romance with Tom, although all the evidence indicated the opposite. According to her, she did not realize what she was doing, being in an unstable emotional state. But even in prison, Susan repeatedly violated the rules. She was caught using prohibited substances and having improper relationships with employees. One of them later said that the initiative and persistence in the development of these contacts came from Susan herself. The tragic story of Susan Smith, which shocked the entire country, became not only a testament to her personal drama but also sparked a wide discussion about the impact of childhood traumas on a person's future fate. It left behind many questions that may never have unambiguous answers. Was her action spontaneous, or was it still coldly planned? How much was she influenced by the shocks she experienced in childhood? And is it possible to find any justification for such an act, no matter how difficult the past was? This story will long be the subject of analysis by psychologists, sociologists, and criminologists who will try to understand what pushes a mother to commit the most terrible crime, depriving her own children of life. August 2024 brought a new scandal to Susan's life. She contacted a documentary filmmaker and provided him with information about her inner circle, friends, relatives, and even those who suffered from her actions, including her ex-husband David. As it turned out, this director transferred money to the prisoner's account. The violation of the rules cost Susan a 90-day ban on using the phone, tablet, and visiting the prison store. And all this happened on the eve of her possible parole. After serving 30 years behind bars, Susan gained the right to petition for release. At the hearing, her ex-husband David, the father of the deceased Michael and Alexander, spoke. He said that the last 3 decades had been a difficult ordeal for him, but he came to defend the memory of his sons. David emphasized that on that fateful night, Susan made a conscious choice, and her actions were not an accident or a mistake. According to him, she never showed remorse, did not try to contact him, and did not ask for forgiveness. He noted that her act forever changed his life, and although he managed to cope with the consequences, he never saw any regret on her part. David stressed that although state laws at the time of the crime in 1995 provided for the possibility of parole for life prisoners after 30 years, this term is only 15 years for each murdered son, which can hardly be considered a fair punishment. He begged the parole board not to release Susan. David insisted that her crime was not just a mistake, but a deliberate act for which one should not be given a chance for freedom. He noted the absence of sincere remorse on her part and assured that as a father, he would continue to fight for the memory of his sons. Susan was present at the hearing virtually. She tried to justify herself, expressing regret over what happened, but acknowledging the impossibility of changing anything. When asked by the commission, she replied that on the night of the crime, she was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Her lawyer mentioned the defendant's work with psychologists, and Susan herself assured that she intended to continue therapy if released. She also apologized to everyone who participated in the investigation, especially to those who found the car with the bodies of the children. Susan claimed that she did not try to run away or hide, but simply got scared, not knowing how to tell the truth to her relatives. The commission rejected the petition for release, but Susan will have the opportunity to apply again in 2 years. This refusal became another confirmation that neither the court nor society is ready to allow her to return to normal life. Despite statements of remorse, her behavior in prison and evidence of the deliberate nature of the crime indicated otherwise. The Susan Smith case remains one of the most shocking and resonant crimes in U.S. history. It raises fundamental questions about the nature of maternal love, the impact of childhood traumas on later life, and the limits of human cruelty. This tragedy forever changed the lives of not only direct participants but also many people who followed the developments. It forced society to think about what can push a mother to take such a terrible step and whether it is possible to prevent such crimes in the future. At the same time, this story has become an example of how personal tragedy can turn into a media show, where every step and word of the accused is dissected and analyzed under the microscope of public opinion. In this context, the issues of just punishment and the possibility of rehabilitation are especially acute. Can a person who has committed such a horrific crime count on a second chance? And if so, under what conditions and after what term? The answers to these questions cannot be unambiguous and depend on many factors, from the circumstances of the case to the personality of the criminal himself. The Susan Smith case, without a doubt, has gone down in history as one of the most tragic and ambiguous cases of infanticide. It will forever remain a painful reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the darkness that can lurk behind the mask of an ordinary loving mother. And although many years have passed, this story continues to excite and raise questions to which, perhaps, exhaustive answers will never be found. The life of Anita Knutson was cut short suddenly and tragically. No one could have predicted that the Saturday morning of June 3, 2007 would prove fatal for her. Usually full of enthusiasm and plans for the future, the 18-year-old student had no idea that fate had already determined a completely different scenario for her. The person who decided to take the girl's life coldly entered her room with a clear intention to finish the job. He did not hesitate for a second, acting quickly, confidently and soullessly. The horrific crime that took place in the small university town of Minot, North Dakota, shocked the entire community. Anita was known for her friendliness, sensitivity, and cheerfulness. Her death came as a real shock to family, friends, and acquaintances. For 15 long years, law enforcement tried to untangle this web of mysteries, putting forward a wide variety of theories and questioning dozens of witnesses. But despite all efforts, the investigation reached a dead end, lacking sufficient evidence to charge anyone. The Knutson family, in which, in addition to Anita, daughter Anna and son Daniel were growing up, lived in the cozy town of Butte, which was about an hour's drive from Minot, where the girl was studying in her first year at the local university. Anita had always stood out for her abilities and perseverance in her studies, actively participating in public life. She dreamed of becoming a primary school teacher, for which, according to her loved ones, she had a remarkable talent. Despite a fairly tight schedule, the girl had part-time jobs in order to pay for her education and rent an apartment that she shared with her childhood friend. Anita found time to socialize with friends and attend various events. In June 2007, she was looking forward to the summer holidays, full of plans and hopes. Anita maintained close contact with her parents, calling home every day, interested in the lives of her brother and sister. That is why, when her mother could not reach her daughter on Saturday, June 3rd, she immediately suspected something was wrong. Maybe she's on shift at the hotel, the woman reassured herself. But as it turned out later, Anita never showed up for work that day. The next morning there was still no news from the girl. Anita's worried father, Gordon Knutson, decided to visit his daughter in person. When the man drove up to the house, he immediately noticed a broken window in Anita's room. Coming closer, he saw a motionless body behind the glass, in which he instantly recognized his daughter. Reaching out his hand, Gordon touched her icy skin. An ordinary gesture that was forever etched in his memory as a terrible proof of the inevitable. In desperation, the father rushed to look for the house manager. The landlady Laura Nagub unlocked the apartment door, and Gordon went inside, although he already understood that it was too late for Anita. The girl had received 2 stab wounds, one to the chest, the other to the right side. The absence of signs of struggle caused surprise. It seemed that the criminal acted swiftly and knew exactly where to strike. There were rumors that the killer covered Anita's body with a robe. Perhaps he wanted to distance himself from what he had done, or in this way express his belated remorse. In any case, this gesture could indicate personal motives for the crime. Next to the body on the bed lay material evidence, Anita's cell phone and a folding knife with dried blood, hidden under the bedspread. But despite this, nothing disappeared from the room, neither money from the wallet, nor a laptop, nor a camera. So robbery as a motive immediately fell away. Examination of the crime scene gave unexpected results. It would seem that the criminal could easily get into the room through the broken window. However, experts found that he entered through the door. The day before the tragedy, on Friday evening, an employee of the residential complex, Bryana's, discovered a broken mosquito net under Anita's window. He did not attach much importance to this, deciding that he would fix it later, and simply lifted the net from the ground. But the next day, when the worried Gordon Knutson began to find out the circumstances of what had happened, Marty handed the net over to the police. However, the investigators were quite skeptical about the version with the break-in. There were no prints in the room, on the windowsill, or under the window, and the layer of dust remained untouched. Instead, traces of blood were found on the net, which probably got there only after the murder. It looks like someone deliberately staged a break-in through the window. When Anita's father, together with the manager, unlocked the apartment door, they were locked from the inside, which could be locked both from the inside and from the outside. It is known that only 4 people had keys: Anita herself, her roommate Nicole, who left town that weekend, the landlady Laura, and the residential complex employee Marty. By the way, the behavior of the latter immediately aroused suspicion among the investigators. The man claimed that he found the damaged net, but for some reason did not notice Anita's body, which was clearly visible in the window. Instead, Gordon Knutson immediately realized that something bad had happened to his daughter, even as he approached the building. Preliminary DNA tests taken from various items in the room, including the knife, did not yield results. Then the investigators began to study the girl's social circle, hoping to stumble upon at least some clue. It was possible to establish that Anita died early on Sunday morning, more than a day before the body was found. According to the data from her phone, the girl last corresponded with a friend named Michael Mangum. At 4:30 in the morning on June 3rd, he wrote to her, "Thought you would answer my last message." Despite the personal tone of their communication, it did not have an overtly romantic flavor. A few minutes later, at 4:48, Anita replied, "I didn't know what to say." At 4:53 Michael sent the last message, "You don't have to say anything." But Anita did not read this anymore. The guy did not hide that he would not mind having a closer relationship, but, according to friends, it never went further than friendship. But Mangum was not the only one who cherished hopes for reciprocity. In her hometown of Butte lived Tyler Schmalz, a shy young man who had few friends. For him, Anita was almost the only friend. She always treated Tyler kindly and sincerely. Once he even invited her to the prom. Soon Schmalz decided to move closer to Anita, renting an apartment in her building. It seems that the young man really fell in love with the girl, although there was nothing between them. After her death, he began to behave strangely. He often hung around the crime scene, asking the police for details of the investigation, published a video in memory of Anita, placed billboards with information about the murder, and even organized a fundraiser. Tyler was questioned several times. His DNA samples and fingerprints were taken. However, no matches were found with the physical evidence found at the crime scene. Meanwhile, police found a witness who, on the night of the murder, saw a man running away from the residential complex. His description was passed on for orientation, but it quickly became clear that it was a local resident who regularly ran in the morning. Another lead turned out to be false. A new building was being constructed near Anita's house. The builders, who had been working on the site for several weeks, had the opportunity to secretly observe the windows. All the workers, including those who repaired the roof, were checked, and DNA samples were taken. But the involvement of any of them in the crime was not confirmed. Investigators continued to question Anita's close circle. Special attention was drawn to her childhood friend and neighbor in the apartment, Nicole Thomas. The girls had been friends since their school years, and were very close. Nicole claimed that sometimes there were minor misunderstandings between them, but no more. However, other mutual acquaintances said something else. They say that the friends often quarreled. Gordon Knutson even installed an additional lock on his daughter's room. There were rumors that Nicole was jealous of Anita, because she was much more popular among friends, had more chances to have relationships with guys. At the same time, Anita did not like that Nicole often brought unfamiliar men to the apartment. Loud scandals often broke out between them. Messages from Nicole were found on Anita's phone, reproaching her for avoiding her. Some of them were left unanswered. In total, investigators questioned more than 40 people. They took DNA samples from under the nails of the deceased, from the knife and the windowsill. But none of the samples matched the database. At that time there were no suspects, but later some people were eliminated from the list. In particular, Tyler Schmalz, whose strange behavior never received an explanation. However, the investigators were inclined to believe that it was not a murder in a fit of anger, and besides, the criminal was unlikely to enter the apartment through the window. Schmalz sought to help the investigation, convincing them of his sincere feelings for Anita, openly giving interviews. Also, suspicions fell on the house worker Bryana, who was the first to find the net, but for some reason did not notice Anita's body, clearly visible through the glass. However, after a few years, the case did not move forward. The investigation received information from a witness who noticed a suspicious man fleeing from the residential complex at approximately the time the crime was committed, as determined by experts. The unknown person's description was sent out, but soon one of the local residents confessed that it was him, because every morning at this time the man ran his usual route. So this clue turned out to be false. Construction was underway near Anita's home, and workers who had been working on the site for several weeks had the opportunity to observe the windows of her apartment. All employees, including roofers, passed DNA tests. None of them were among the suspects. Law enforcement officers continued to question the victim's closest circle, in particular her longtime friend and neighbor Nicole Thomas. The girls had been friends since school and were once very close. Nicole assured that sometimes there were minor household misunderstandings between them, but there were no fierce conflicts. However, according to other friends of Anita, the relationship between the girls was completely different. According to their testimonies, the neighbors often quarreled, to the point that Gordon, Anita's father, installed an additional lock on the door of her room. There was an opinion that Nicole was jealous of her friend's popularity among mutual acquaintances and potential suitors. At the same time, Anita was annoyed that Nicole often brought unfamiliar men to their apartment and left them there alone. Quarrels between the girls sometimes turned into loud scandals. Messages from Nicole were found on the deceased's phone, in which she reproached her friend for ignoring her. Some of these messages remained unanswered. In total, the investigators questioned more than 4 dozen people. Experts took DNA samples from the victim's fingernails, from the windowsill and the knife. At that time there were no matches, but the materials were kept for further checks. And although the case did not make it possible to determine the main suspect, the circle of likely criminals was narrowed down. For example, Tyler Schmalz's behavior, although it seemed strange, had no direct connection with the murder. It did not look like a murder in a fit of anger, and besides, the investigation established that the criminal was unlikely to enter the apartment through the window. Schmalz had access to his key and sincerely tried to help the investigation find the real killer. He willingly communicated with both the police and journalists, talking about his feelings for Anita and emphasizing that they were just friends. Another person who attracted the attention of law enforcement officers was Bryana, an employee of the residential complex. The man was thoroughly checked, but in January 2009 he was found dead in his own apartment. The death was classified as a suicide, although this gave rise to a lot of rumors. However, despite suspicions, the investigation was never able to prove Marty's involvement in the crime. The death of Anita Knutson remained unsolved for 15 years. The girl's family did not abandon attempts to seek justice, giving interviews from time to time and disseminating information about this case, hoping that eventually this would help to get on some trail. In 2013, Anita's brother, Daniel, committed suicide. He never managed to come to terms with the loss of his sister. Relatives recalled that Anita's death changed him forever, as if it took a part of himself. Thus, the family lost 2 children. In the fall of 2021, the investigation received a new impetus thanks to a television program about unsolved crimes. The authors of this project, using their own resources and connections, often contributed to the resumption of investigative actions in such cases. This is what happened in Minot. Journalists took up a new study of Anita's youth, her circle of acquaintances, and identified several of the most likely suspects. Tyler Schmalz was summoned for questioning again, but was soon excluded from the development. Michael Mangum, the last person Anita corresponded with on the night of the murder, also did not arouse suspicion. There was no conflict between them. There was no need to interrogate Bryana, who raised the net under the window and for some reason did not notice the body of the deceased. Investigators found that the light was not on in the room at that time, so it was simply impossible to see anything through the glass. There was one more person involved, Nicole Rice, maiden name Thomas. At the time of the resumption of the investigation in 2021, she was working at a military base in Minot. The woman was detained and charged with the murder of Anita Knutson. Almost a decade and a half after the crime, the police finally announced that they had managed to identify a suspect. 34-year-old Nicole Rice was arrested and taken to the county jail. And although most of the detectives who once worked on this case have already retired, the disclosure of Anita's murder remained a matter of honor for the local police. In recent years, the case has been led by Carl Ashman and Mike Lathalt. Significant assistance was provided to them by the aforementioned TV program, the authors of which attracted their own resources to the investigation and attracted third-party experts. In the end, this made it possible to obtain an arrest warrant. Nicole Rice was released on $125,000 bail. While she was waiting for trial, her husband supported her. The woman insisted on her innocence and demanded that all charges against her be dropped. The prosecutor's office presented its own arguments and grounds for considering the case in court. The North Dakota FEMID was hearing the case against Nicole Rice, who was charged with a particularly serious crime. At the court hearing, she was asked if she pleaded guilty. The answer was negative. From the very beginning of the investigation, there was no doubt that among all those who knew Anita, only Nicole had a strained relationship with her. The correspondence between the girls testified to constant conflicts and the desire to live separately. As their mutual acquaintances recalled, the friends were very close before, but over time, when they began to share one apartment, the relationship deteriorated. Quarrels broke out more and more often, even over such trifles as an alarm clock or an aquarium. According to others, Nicole often spoke negatively about Anita. For a long time, Nicole avoided arrest by referring to her alibi. The girls' parents claimed that she was visiting their farm throughout the weekend, from June 2nd to 4th, which coincided with the likely time the crime was committed. However, one of the witnesses said that he saw Nicole in a bar located 45 minutes away from Minot. On June 2, 2007, she said that after the bar she went home to get clothes. At a preliminary court hearing at the end of 2022, Detective Letalt added to the case the testimony of people familiar with both girls. He drew attention to the discrepancies in Nicole's testimony, which became one of the grounds for revising the initial version of events. Her testimony contradicted each other. At first she assured that she had not seen Anita that weekend, and then admitted that she had briefly come to their apartment. One of the most important facts that became known only after a few years was associated with Nicole's ex-boyfriend. Witnesses said that once at a party, drunk to unconsciousness, she allegedly made a cynical and contemptuous remark about her involvement in the murder. In 2008 to 2009, the police received a message about her confession at that party. Unfortunately, at that time the investigation was not able to establish the identity of the informant. And only in 2022 it turned out that it was a man who confirmed his testimony. Nicole's ex-boyfriend also told the police that she really confessed to him what she had done, but later, when she sobered up, she refused to repeat it. Investigators suggested that Nicole had a motive: she wanted to move to a new apartment. In addition, the girl had the opportunity to stage the crime scene. One of the key pieces of evidence was a DNA sample on a folding knife. Its quantity was not enough for verification in the law enforcement database, but it allowed for a comparative analysis. DNA tests of several suspects showed that everyone could be excluded except Nicole. The samples of the men involved in the case did not match the one removed from the crime scene, leaving Nicole the only one whose involvement could not be completely refuted. Having weighed the evidence collected, the judge concluded that there was enough to bring charges. No new evidence has appeared since Nicole's arrest, but a review of the available materials gave the prosecutor's office grounds to initiate further judicial consideration of the case. The hearing is likely to take place in mid or late 2023. The accused lawyer, Philip Baker, is apparently going to point to another potential suspect, Devin Hall. Shortly after Anita's murder, this man was arrested for attempting to break into a house with a weapon. The defense claimed that a witness who saw the silhouette of a fugitive near the crime scene described a person similar to David Hall. Moreover, reports of former investigators and even FBI analysts were found in the archives, indicating the likelihood of Hall's involvement in the murder, suggesting that he could have entered the house and caused trouble. However, the investigation excluded Devin Hall from the list of suspects after reviewing the footage from CCTV cameras at the Minot railway station. It turned out that he arrived in the city only on the evening of June 3, that is, after the probable time of the crime. Even if we assume that Hall was the same fugitive, the time frame still would not coincide with the prosecution's version. The prosecutor's office insists that Anita died on the morning of June 3, shortly after sending the last messages. Instead, the defense seems to question the time frame established by the investigation, suggesting that the murder could have happened much later, after Hall's arrival. Despite this, the prosecution continues to insist that all the evidence points to Nicole Rice. At the same time, there are many details in the case that Nicole's lawyers can use in favor of alternative versions and suspects. The exact date of the trial has not yet been set. However, if Nicole's guilt is proven, she faces life imprisonment without the right to early release. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.